All right, welcome to Rich Math Academy. Today we're going to look at multiplication and division of decimal numbers. So I'm going to start with an example. So I have here 1.25 multiplied by 0.5. All right, so with decimal multiplication, what you do is you count the number of decimal places, right? The number of decimal places are to the right of the decimal point. So for example, in this top one, we have 1, 2 decimal places, and in the bottom one, we have only 1 decimal place, right? So once you know the number of decimal places, you note it down. So here we counted a total of 3 decimal places. All right. Then what we do is we just multiply the two numbers as if they were originally whole numbers. So this is going to be 125 times 5. All right. When we multiply 125 by 5, we get 625. Right. Once you get that, you need to account for the decimal places that we noticed here. So we said there were 3. So we come over here. There's an imaginary decimal point here. So we have to move this decimal point 3 places to the left. So this is 1, 2, 3. So our decimal point is now here, right? So our answer is now 0.625, which is the same as 0.625. All right? So remember, you're just counting the decimal places, note it down, multiply as whole numbers, and then count backwards. So let's do another one. So let's say I have 1.25 times 0.05 to multiply. Same thing we did as we did before. So we count the number of decimal places. In this case, we have 4 decimal places. This is the first, second, third, fourth, right? So we note that down somewhere. And then we multiply the two numbers as whole numbers. This also gives us 625, same as before. And then we account for this. So we start from here, remove 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then we fill this with a 0, right? So now this becomes point, that is this point, 0.625. All right? Or we can, the beginning 0 doesn't really matter. This 0 here. Now we put our number. All right? So that's all you have to do. You just count the number of decimal places and account for it in the end. So let's do one final example. So let's say I have 1.25 multiplied by 1.5. Right? 1.25 multiplied by 1.5. The same thing as before. I just count the number of decimal places. In this case, we have 3 decimal places. And then I multiply my two numbers as whole numbers. Multiply by 15. When you multiply these two numbers, it gives you, let's see. So 5 times 5 is 25. We have 2 here. 2 times 5 is 10. And then we add this 2, so it's 12. And then the 1. And then 1 times 5 is what? 5 plus 1 is 6. And then we do 5 times 1 is 5. 2 times 1 is 2. And 1 times 1 is 1. So in the end, this is going to give us 1875. All right. So remember, this is not the final answer. We have to account for this. So we start with our imaginary point here. We're moving 3 places to the left. So we end up here. So our final answer is 1.875. All right. Okay. Now we're going to do division. We're going to try and do division. All right. So let's do some division. So our first example is going to be 6.25 divided by 0.05. All right. So when you have this, normally you would like to, write it as a fraction. So this is the same as 6.25 over 0.05. Then from here, what you do is you aim at changing the denominator to a whole number, right? And as you do that, you have to account for the changes in the numerator as well. What I mean by that is you try and move the decimal point 2 places to the right, which is 1, 2. And as soon as you do that, you have to do the same thing in the numerator, right? So the numerator becomes 625. And the denominator becomes 5. Remember, you can't start a number with a 0, right? So ultimately, all these zeros vanish. So we have 625 divided by 5. And this gives us 125. When you get this number, that's your final answer, right? There's nothing else to do, because the whole aim is to get the denominator to be a whole number. If we're able to achieve that and we do the division, whatever we get is the answer. This is a little different from the multiplication where you have to go back and forth. This one, whatever you account for in the beginning takes care of it. All right, let's do another example. So let's say I have 12.5 divided by 0.05. All right. So like I said before, it's easier if it's it's shown in the form of fraction. So I have 12.5, and then down here I have 0.05. So like I said before, what you're going to do is to change this denominator into a whole number. And the way you do that is by moving the decimal point as many times as it takes for it to become a whole number. And each time you move, you have to consider to move the decimal point in the numerator as well. So here we move 2 decimal places, right? So the denominator has now become a 5, right? And then we have to do the same thing here. 2 decimal places. So 1 and then 2. So you realize there's this 12 here. We have to fill it up, right? To account for the decimal places that we moved. So in the numerator, we have 1250, right? So now we can divide. So 5 into 12 is 2. And then that's 10. Remember 2, 25. So that will be 50. So this will be 250. Right? This is our final answer. Nothing else to do. All right? And the last thing I need to mention is when you move in the decimal points, it's actually, you are actually multiplying by 100, right? To turn the 0.05 into the whole number 5. And once you're doing that, you multiply by 100 in the numerator as well, right? So the number of zeros that, points that you move accounts for, what you were supposed to multiply by. All right. Thank you very much for listening.